Welcome to IVF This, episode 1. Let's do this. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello out there and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Emily Ginn, and I am so glad that you have joined me today. I'm recording this first episode, in my office, which we have just redone, and I am loving it. We have built-in bookcases made, and I just never want to leave. I love it so much. Anyway, I hope you are doing so well today. My goal for this first episode is to tell you what IVF This is, what it isn't, and a little bit about how I got here, and also one of my favorite quotes that I hope will be an inspiration to you and a taste of what is to come on this podcast. Before I get into that, I want to teach you something that you can use right now. We are conditioned to believe that our external environment creates our feelings. This is why we focus so heavily on jobs, our bank account, our bodies, our relationships, weight loss, and of course, having a baby. We treat these things as the key to finally feeling happy. If I can get a better job, more money, or have a baby, that all of these things are going to make me feel better. Problem is that this ignores the role of our thoughts, and our thinking is paramount. You might believe that your infertility, your failed transfers, or miscarriages are creating your sadness, self-loathing, and your unhappiness, your desire to have a baby or another baby. But your desires don't just come out of the clear blue sky. They're created by your thoughts. This is the basic tenet of cognitive behavioral therapy and the principle of the think, feel, do cycle that I teach. Again, in our culture, we are conditioned to believe this. We are conditioned to believe that our external environment or our circumstances create our feelings. In many ways, our society ignores the role that our thoughts play in creating our feelings and driving our actions. But trust me when I say that this cycle is always working in the background of your brain. And this is good news. When you use this cycle, it can help you to understand why what is happening in your brain is happening. It can help you understand that you're not, in fact, going crazy. It can help you understand why seeing a pregnancy announcement can send you into a downward spiral that can last for hours and sometimes days. It is never the announcement. It is your thoughts about the announcement. Thoughts like, when will it be my time? It will never be my turn. I so desperately want to have my announcement, and so many more thoughts in that vein. Typically, the act or the do part of the think, feel, do process looks a lot like self-judgment, blame, self-loathing, spinning, rumination, forecasting terrible things to come. And none of this stuff serves us. None of it. Understanding this process can help you turn the volume down on those thoughts by planning for them to come, allowing for them to be there, and gaining your power back. I mean, if you think about it, if something like a pregnancy announcement could cause feelings of despair and hopelessness, then we're all kind of screwed because people will keep having babies and people will keep announcing that they're having babies. But if your thoughts create those feelings of despair and hopelessness, then we've hit the jackpot, because from this position, you can start to observe your thoughts, change your thoughts, practice new thoughts, and eventually develop new automatic ways to think about your journey. And that's where I come in. I teach you how to become aware of this patterned thinking, what this type of thinking creates in your life, which is usually just a ton of despair. Creating awareness around these thoughts reduces the power that they have over you. It reduces the impact that they have over you. It changes your experience of the thoughts and the emotions. The tips and tools that I'll share with you are elements of my own self-coaching practice. I've used this to help heal throughout my infertility journey. I use them to stop hating myself. I use them to find my smile and my laugh again. I use them to find joy and to welcome sadness and to know that the range of emotions that I experience is just part of being a human. In doing this work, I really understand what it's like to have my own back, to believe fully in my capability of handling any emotion that I experience, and to mend the relationships that had suffered during this process, and to believe that I'm whole and worthy no matter what I can offer to anyone. I want this podcast to be a place that is practical. I want it to be what I wish I would have had during my first 8 years of infertility and fertility treatments. I want it to be the podcast that I found when I was realizing that more therapy wasn't what I needed to build the next chapter of my life, and how I used the coaching principles that I teach to process my pain and end my suffering. I want you to come here and feel hopeful, inspired, and uplifted. But I also don't want to be unrealistic. I'm an irreverent person by nature, and I do my best to keep things lighthearted, but I don't want this podcast to be all rainbows and daisies and silver lining and any of the other cliched crap that we hear in so many places. Since I have walked many years of infertility, and by all accounts, I'm a very practical person, I try very hard not to fall into the trap of what we don't need during infertility and fertility treatments: cliches and platitudes. We don't need to be told how we're handling our journey. It's our journey. We get to do with it what we want. There is no right or wrong. But there are many helpful tools that I have learned as I've studied grief, healing, loss, and trauma through my 15-year social work career, and then transitioning as a life coach client, and now as a certified life coach. And now, after having coached so many women seeking or undergoing fertility treatments, I have a lot to teach you, and that's what I want this podcast to be about. I also don't want it to be about advice. And that may seem a little strange, but I don't really believe in giving coaching clients advice because I can't possibly know what's best for you in your life. And what's best for your life might not be what's best for my life or another client's life, right? But I want you to know that on some level, you know the next step to take for your life. And so what I can help you do is get those obstacles out of the way. Are you locked into overwhelm? Are you trapped in a constant loop of all the things that can go wrong? Is infertility affecting your relationships or your marriage? I can help you get out of your own way and unblock yourself so that you can create the life and future that you want before, during, or after your IVF journey. And I want this podcast to be something that is practical, something that is usable and tangible, because understanding theory and understanding things conceptually is nice, but it doesn't really add much value to your life until you figure out how to apply something. So I'm going to use the term husband and the pronouns she, her, and him because that's my experience, right? I'm a cis heterosexual woman married to a cis heterosexual man. But I want you to know that you're welcome here no matter what term or what pronouns you use to describe yourself or your person. So whether you are single, married, engaged, partners, co-parents, opposite sex, same sex, the terminology really isn't relevant to what we're talking about here. What matters is that you are a human who is suffering while walking a journey of infertility, and you're doing your best to regain your footing, to rebuild your life, to move forward, to figure out who you are now, and to create the life that you want. So how did I get here? You might be wondering. I kind of discovered life coaching by accident, really. I wasn't looking for a coach. I wasn't really aware of what one did for a long time. I'd been a licensed master social worker for many, many years at that point, and I'd begun pursuing my clinical licensure in counseling practice during that time. I realized that counseling really wasn't where my heart was, and so I continued kind of along that corporate healthcare ladder. And thankfully, my amazing sister-in-law, I love you, Katie, told me about a brand new podcast called the Life Coach School Podcast with Brooke Castillo. Even though I had no interest in becoming a life coach, I became hooked on the podcast and I listened to it every week as it came out. During this time, I was suffering around 2 years of primary infertility. In the summer of 2013, I had back-to-back surgeries, the final one resulting in my left ovary being removed. On top of that, we also identified that my husband's sperm quality and motility issues were of concern. So here we are, both female and male factor infertility. This was by far the darkest time of my life, or one of the darkest times, actually. We did end up getting pregnant spontaneously after I had my ovary removed, and that resulted in our oldest son. When we decided to grow our family, we encountered secondary infertility. We went through 4 failed IUI cycles before moving on to IVF. Our first IVF round was successful. We had another son. However, our second round ended with a failed transfer. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have a story that maybe it's a little bit different, but I imagine that you know the feeling of losing all of the dreams that you've had of having a baby or the family that you dream of. It's so surreal, and I'm going to say pretty much a nightmare. During this time, I saw a couple of different therapists who were both helpful, and it was a good experience overall for me, but I still couldn't figure out how to handle all of the thoughts and why I was still so effing unhappy. What truly helped me change the trajectory of my life, what really helped me create the next chapter of my life, going from surviving to thriving, even though that's a cliche and I hate it, was life coaching. And in that program, I learned how to really manage the roller coaster of emotions that I was experiencing and to do it in a way that served me. And I learned to manage my mind and to figure out how to walk with my grief and with my anxiety and figure out how to mourn the loss of the plan for my life and how I thought it would have gone, right? But not let it limit how much of happiness or how much of a life I could create in the future. I realized that I could hold sadness and joy simultaneously, that I could laugh while crying, and that I could be whole and still want more, like growing my family. And because of that, and because of my social work background, and because I've always been a self-help junkie, I read everything I could find about infertility, healing, and trauma, loss, post-traumatic stress, post-traumatic growth, and I just absorbed it all. And I started to become stronger, to become more resilient and more intentional in the way that I lived, and really just finally excited about the journey instead of dreading it. And knowing on a deeper level than I had ever known before that life was short and unpredictable, I decided to change careers. I knew I could help people by staying in social work or continuing in corporate healthcare, but because life coaching had really helped me change my life, I wanted to help other people change their lives and not just listen to them talk about their problems. And that's how therapy felt to me. It's not everybody's experience, but that was my experience. Life coaching felt much more practical to me, so much more usable and tangible. And so I finally made the decision to enroll in a life coaching certification program. Fast forward to today and a lot of hard work later, I have built a successful life coaching practice, helping women seeking or undergoing fertility treatments to come out stronger on the other side, to smile again and to remember how to laugh again, to not be so consumed with fear and anxiety. It was what felt to me a natural byproduct of a lifelong interest in self-help, a journey through my own infertility experience, and a strong desire to be of service to others. And that's by far the most meaningful and important work that I've ever done. So the quote that I promised you at the beginning of the episode, it's from Becoming, Michelle Obama's autobiography. In 2018, Michelle Obama released Becoming, and in it, she disclosed that she experienced miscarriages, infertility, and eventually became pregnant with her 2 daughters via IVF. This was a pretty landmark occasion for such a high-profile woman to talk about miscarriage, infertility, and IVF. So while I love the chapters about her discussing her fertility struggles, the quote that struck me most was one she gave on her promotional tour, which is, I think that the worst thing that we do to each other as women is to not share the truth about our bodies and how they work and how they don't work. Yes. We need to talk about this. 1 in 8 couples experiences infertility, and 1 in 6 globally. 1 in 4 women have experienced miscarriage from a known pregnancy. The amount of discussions around these topics does not match the level of prevalence that occurs. Talking about it is an essential part of breaking the silence and stigma of infertility and fertility treatments. We get to openly experience the pain, frustration, grief, joy, if we choose to do so. That's how we eliminate the stigma. And that's how I ended the shame and guilt associated with my infertility. And that's what I want for you. So wherever you have been, whatever you have gone through, wherever you are in your journey, welcome to the podcast. You know, more than most people, that we can't control the cards that we have been dealt. But honestly, I hope this podcast will show you that the cards we're dealt aren't nearly as important as how we choose to play them. And that because we can't control them, when we spend our time and energy focusing on what we can't control, we will create less of the life that we want instead of more. So I hope you will join me in breaking free from anxiety, stepping into the light, and starting to live your life out loud. Let's start turning your attention towards how we're going to play the cards that we've been dealt. Let's turn our attention to say IVF This. If you like what you've been hearing so far and you think others could benefit from the IVF This podcast, it would be amazing if you would take a couple of minutes to rate and review it. Ratings and especially reviews are vital in helping a podcast become discoverable. I'd love it if you would give me your honest opinion. And of course, a great review would be lovely. But click that subscribe button. You'll automatically receive weekly updates without adding another thing on your to-do list. And if you feel called to share it with others that you think may benefit, then you're doing a good deed for the week, and I would be eternally grateful. I hope you have an amazing day. And until next time, I adore you. You have got this, and I will see you in episode 2. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.